And I will just say hello to everyone on the recording as well, and just say a huge, massive welcome and thank you to Nicole Masters for joining us today. Um, I'm not going to do a big bio, Nicole, because I just want to maximize our time with you. But
Yeah.
your name is so well known in agriculture in Australia, and everyone
Oh, that's
just
fun.
and everyone loves your work. People talk about Nicole Masters, and they know they're going to get something really interesting, something with a lot of integrity, and
Mhm.
yeah, we're just wrapped to be able to have you here today. And I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands that we are on, and pay my deepest respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. I'm on the beautiful Widjabul country of the Bundjalung Nation here in northern New South Wales. And I would like to say that the land always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So over to you, Nicole. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. And this is a very interesting conversation. Yeah, it's interesting you say integrity. So my company name is Integrity Soils, and I came about that name in 2006 after coming out of the organic industry and having this sense of people not walking their walk or saying something was something, but actually trying to manipulate that or greenwash it. And when you name your company something like integrity, it really is a call to always be expanding into this space, because I feel like we're not always in integrity. There's things maybe that I'm committed to, and like I'm drinking, it's a probiotic soda, just in my defense, but here it is with an aluminium can. I'm bilingual. And I have those things that I know that are my commitment, and yet there's a gap. And the more that I can shrink that gap and be working on where am I aligned to my deeper purpose, then life really gets in flow. And when I'm not, that's where disempowerment shows up. That's where I just feel tired or overwhelmed. Um, and so it's just an interesting reflection in terms of how we name something, and being involved in what I guess is being termed the regenerative agricultural movement. There's a piece in that as well around what we name things. So thinking of, for me, it, regeneration is not a noun, it's a verb. It's that action of, are we regenerating? And that also includes regenerating self. And so we bring that in our coaching work. And I guess that's the theme for the next 90 minutes is, how do we distinguish what coaching is differently perhaps than some of the older models of, not older models, because I think coaching has always been around too, but thinking of coaching as a distinct approach to working with people. So we often say with Integrity Soils, it might be that you could go through that phenomenon of someone needs a fish and you're going to give them a fish. Or as really good teachers, we're teaching that person to fish so they can fish for themselves, right? That makes sense. But at Integrity Soils, what we're asking is, why are you fishing? To actually put out that net of asking the questions that's below our action so that something new may arise. So we're currently running a program called Create. We run that once a year. It's for agricultural professionals or people that are interested in professionalizing what they're doing and turning their passion and their know-how in regenerative systems into an actual career. And a big part of what we're training people is the mindset piece of, how do I start to see myself as part of the world, part of nature, to not see myself as separate. And how do I really work with clients in a way that something new arises from them that might come out of their blind spot? And so it was kind of ambitious. There's a lot of research in it. There's about 1,000 pages of curriculum that people are working through, but at the same time, this theme is running underneath all the time about, how do we do things differently while we are inside a degenerative system. Here's my Coke. I'm inside a degenerative system of fossil fuel use or consumerism is that we're looking to build something new out of this existing world. And I think there was a quote around the dude who's the guy made Edison, who made the light bulb, that he invented the light bulb by the light of a candle. And that's a little bit about what we're doing right now. And it's almost that emergent, what we call the liminal space. We're stepping through a threshold, opening a doorway and not necessarily knowing what something looks like. So as an educator, it can be a little unnerving. Like we're on this edge, and I think we all, I'm assuming that all of us have gone through an academic background. We've gone through a fairly industrial education system. And a lot of that is structured in terms of you have a very clear curriculum. There's knowledge that's being imparted to you, and then you might, you're going to pass a test or be tested in some way in terms of how do we know if someone's learned that. And we're asking the opposite. How do we have people that can drive themselves from the internal state without expecting a gold star or a certification or an A plus? And I find a lot of my students really struggle because we've come out of academia. I love an A plus. Don't get me wrong. I love to kind of have that level of acknowledgement, but at the same time, what that creates for me is I cram, I shove a whole lot of stuff in, I do really well on tests, and then I forget that information and it doesn't become embodied. And so I'd be interested actually to hear, and I'd love to see you guys on video if you can turn your videos on, is what are some of the ways that you are finding to be effective in actually engendering people's internal will so that it's not something that you need to be cracking a whip? What methods are you using currently to engender a sense of will?
Feel free to jump on the mic if you like, or you can put your responses in the chat.
Yeah.
Hey, Simone and Nicole.
It's
it's Ali.
Hi.
Ali.
Hi. I think for me, what I found works is getting the kids if it's at school, but getting buy-in. So if it's about the food that they eat and their own health, there's more of a chance that they're going to be interested in looking at what the effect of pesticides or what the effect of our practices or whatever are, and often too, I say to them, look, when you guys are my age, when you guys are in your 50s, this isn't going to be around, or that's not going to be around. You're not going to pull up to a fuel pump and put petrol in. Like I try and get them to envisage their world when they're, grandparents. So maybe like trying to get buy-in for them, and that sort of is a better motivator of them learning or than the test type thing, which is what we do at schools. Yeah, maybe that's just a buy.
Nicole, can I jump in?
Yeah, go.
Hey, my name's Jane. We're currently working with our students who are catering for a function that we have at our school coming up next week. And we've been working with the students in creating recipes for them to decide what would they like to cook and what would they like to be preparing to serve to members of our community.
Beautiful. Yeah, so I can see that they would get very engaged about that.
Yeah. So they've been making, we're on the North Coast, we've got a lot of like ingredients for curry paste. They've been actually for the last few weeks making the curry paste that then they'll be harvesting the greens and things to go in the curry for next week. So it's been a really long process too, which is good.
That's extraordinary. So we're talking about high school, primary school?
Yeah, and we're in a Waldorf setting, like a Steiner school.
Yeah.
So we're also working with a production that's being presented to our community that's student-centered and student-led. So students doing music and choreography and lighting and everything.
That's awesome. I don't know have you seen the Enviro Schools program out of New Zealand?
No.
No, yeah, just a phenomenal program, and many of the schools in New Zealand have taken it on. But the Enviro Schools is that like bringing all the different aspects, if that's food or energy, or how do we cook, or how do we sell something, and packaging that around growing food in their own gardens. Seen some really cool initiatives coming out of that program.
Yeah, great.
I,
Some of our students
no.
are off to the local Mullumbimby market tomorrow morning to do produce as well.
Yeah. Excellent. How else, what other tools are you guys using to engender an internal will? Let people do things.
Can I jump in here? Is that okay?
Go, Jeff.
We run a farmers market every Friday. So the kids are responsible for growing it and selling it to the school community. So what I find is in this kind of age of instant gratification that when the kids actually put a seed or raise a seedling, put it in the ground, and then they've got to wait until that plant produces so they can harvest it and take it all the way through to, putting it on a rudimentary desk out the front of at the school where we sell. It's a really good thing because, it's not an instant thing. It's something that they've had to wait, be patient, care for all the way through. So it's not so much academic, I guess. It's more a little bit more hands-on, but it's more meaningful, and these kids that are up here are urban kids, so no rural background at all, and they get a real kick out of seeing what they've planted grow. I had some kids here yesterday, and they we're doing a different topic down here in our farm classroom, but they wanted to come and see how big their tomatoes have got. This is something that they don't see. It's not something that is in their everyday life. I find that really interesting because my background was on a farm. It was everyday life, but this new generation that I see coming through here, particularly in an urban, we've got a little urban farm here. It's something totally new to these kids, and it's just bringing a different aspect of life into their school.
Yeah. And do you see that then will mean that these kids are more they're more connected to where their food's coming from, and they see that this is something they could do themselves? So you feel like this is something that they could do for the rest of their lives?
That's the goal.
Yeah.
That's the goal. Like the shock on their face when I picked an ear of corn and ate it, or I went and cut some celery and they didn't even know what it was, and I started eating it and they were horrified. They were like, "What are you doing?" I'm eating celery. Can you do that? Yeah.
They'll never forget that. I think.
Yeah. They love it. They absolutely love it. Yeah, and I mean, it might be different for kids in a more rural setting, but in an urban environment like this one, it's the look on their face is priceless.
Excellent. So what I heard in that was you're opening up their curiosity.
Yeah.
And I think all of you mentioned this is just like how this relates to our own lives, so that's something that's going to connect more deeply than maybe learning about, I don't know what's coming to mind. Reading a book that was written 1,000 years ago. How do we find something that connects to their here and now? I also heard something about autonomy as well. Like there's a really great TED talk that's worth looking at about what is it. They did a study looking at what keeps people excited and passionate about their jobs and keeps people in their particular jobs is when we focus on having autonomy in the workplace, so that people are actually able to see their piece, their contribution, but then also mastery. So being able to be masterful and improve your skills around something, and also purpose. They found that those three aspects, autonomy, mastery, and purpose, really enlivens somebody and makes them care. And no matter what it was, that might have been someone that was a cleaner in a school. It might have been someone, who's a a farmer or working in a boardroom is that if you fulfill on those three aspects, people stay in the game because they're fulfilling on something deeper. That's beautiful.
Yeah, no,
James? Sorry. Oh yeah, sorry, Jeff. I think
Oh,
James wanted to add.
yeah, no, that's exactly right. Like if they get to pick what they're going to grow, if they've got some sort of underpinning knowledge about seasonal varieties, what does well at whatever time, and then just let them go, take some ownership of what they're going to produce, and responsibility for getting it to the end point. The kids really responding well to that.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, James, did you want to add something?
It's Donna, sorry. Hi, Nicole.
It's Donna. Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah. I worked in this space with kids about 15 years ago at the very early stages, but now we're on farm, holistic managers, and we've got young sons. And it was just, how do you get those kids in their 20s engaged, whether they're interested as to whether they want to be involved in the farm or not? And exactly what you're saying, how can they know if they don't have a go at it? And that balance of imparting your knowledge but not being the parent when they're 20-year-olds. And so just waiting for that curiosity, letting them try. Like they bought some cattle and now they're asking about, how do you know when to move them? It's that. So it's just a real balance of particularly that secondary age, that's when we want to engage them. So to me, it's got to be that hands-on connection. Don't tell them too much. Let them be really curious. I think that's the whole thing about education. And kids get so much given to them. We've got to let them find out, just back off a bit.
Yeah, spot on. Can maybe we write in the chat, all of you that didn't get the chance to add to that, is what I'd like to hear from you is how did you learn the things that you have today? Like, how did you go about, let's say, learning to walk, learning to talk, learning to swim? How did you learn to do those things? So if you think, is that from someone telling you? By stuffing it up, nice one, Jeff. How do we learn these things? Yep, so we see someone, we imitate it. Yeah, try and try again, making mistakes. Practice. Listening and trying. So we're using our senses, right? So if we're listening, we're watching, then we're trying. There's that kinesthetic aspect. We can try and show someone how to swim. We could demonstrate swimming. We could tell them how to do it, but actually it's that action of getting in the pool and swimming. And sometimes I think about the process of like learning to walk. When you watch someone learning to walk, or a child, 100% of that time is not walking. Like 100% of your time of learning to walk is not walking. And if you ever noticed when as a child is like standing and starting to take those first steps, when is it that parents like start clapping and getting very excited? When do we see that happen? Like when a child's learning to walk, when do we celebrate? Have you ever noticed? Yeah, so when they start to do it unassisted, when they actually do it, so that child might take that step, and then you notice that first couple steps and they fall down, that's when people cheer. Like there's this whole thing of like, wow, well done. That excitement of like learning something new can be really hard, and there can be falling down, there can be those trials, but actually celebrating just the process of trying to do something and actually failing. And somewhere along the line we stopped celebrating the try and we stopped celebrating the fall down. But the falling down is often where we're learning, right? Where was my balance? Where was I working out this particular aspect? Like for me, I find that very, very interesting. So working with our students, what I've discovered is that often people don't really have much of a relationship with the difference between coaching or mentoring, or often have never had a coach. I guess some of you might, I don't know if you guys have had a life coach. You could use emoji if you've had a life coach before, or you've had someone that's coached you. Can you use your emojis? Is that easy? Trying to find where mine is. So if you've had a coach before, put your thumbs up. And yeah, never had a coach, certainly never had a formal one. That's interesting. And this is what we're finding is we're running a coaching school with people that have never, so Donna's had a coach, but often we don't have a relationship with a coach apart from potentially sporting coaches, right? I think particularly New Zealand and Australia, we probably have a lot of like sports coaches. But there's a difference when we're thinking about coaching. So coaching for me is I mean, I can look at like the formal way of describing coaching is, I'll give you the actual definition, is partnering with people in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal or professional potential. The process of coaching often unlocks previously untapped sources of imagination, productivity, and leadership. So can you see where actually in your own teaching roles right now, where at times you are coaching? You feel like that is something that you're bringing? You know, and can I get a sense of like, are you guys mainly teaching high school, primary school? Are there like university level teachers here? We got quite a diversity. High school? Both? Secondary? Okay, cool. So I imagine probably many of you are using curiosity and imagination as part of your process. Yeah, and maybe senior students are easier to coach. I don't, yeah, I wonder. I haven't taught primary level students for nearly 16, 17 years. Kids scare me. Like, you guys are so brave. They are like, yeah, the chaos and the yeah, I found like I love working with adults. There's something different, and maybe that would be good for me, is to practice with practicing teaching with younger people more. But what I'm interested in is right now we are facing some of the most complex, most challenging, what we term wicked problems, right? And those wicked problems, I guess you've seen some of this with the yes, no vote that you guys have just gone through that process and talking to Australians, and it just sounds like that was incredibly gut-wrenching and polarizing in Australia. And I can't speak to it because I'm not there. I'm not experiencing what you guys are experiencing, but I would use that as an example of a wicked problem in terms of something that has huge complexity behind it. So think of things like climate change, think of, well, you guys don't have gun law problems. You got that pretty sorted out, but we certainly have that here, or the healthcare system, or non-native species. Like there are these issues that are incredibly complex, and this is why we're so passionate about coaching, is we believe that this is part of how do we start to train people of any age in being able to work through complexity and being able to have conversations that we would consider polarizing. Take vaccinations or non-vaccinations. You know, being in Australia in April, just hearing there's quite a lot of energy around that particular topic, you know, and how do we have these conversations without losing friendships or family connections, and how do we train young people in being able to have some of these challenging conversations. So there's a couple of things that we actually use as frameworks, and one of them is polarity mapping. So I don't know if you guys have ever done polarity mapping. I wonder if I've got one here. We're going to find it. So the idea with a polarity map, and I'll actually use this in my teaching when I first start working with large groups, is what you often find under any issue that appears to be polarizing and appears to have people feeling a lot of anger or resentment or being very positional about their belief systems, is what I'm interested in is what's your value underneath that? What is it that you care about? And how do we talk about what you deeply care about? Because what people do is they've collapsed the issue with what they value, and then it becomes very personal. So if that is immunization, if that is climate change, if it is coal, choose your topics. People take it really, really personally. So what I'm interested in and what polarity mapping gives you a tool to work with is getting really interested in, what do you care about? What are the deeper values? And so we could do this exercise if you wanted to, just a little bit, if you wanted to look at some of these. So we could choose, I want to choose anything that's going to make someone get really mad, because that's fun, but not very constructive when we only have like another hour together. So what's something that we could talk about that is polarizing, but not in a situation where you might want to scream from the room? What would be a good topic? You put one in the chat. A 4-day week work, right? Do people get polarized about that? Like they have strong views that you should or should not have a 4-day week? Yeah. Okay, that could be fun. Okay. Does pineapple belong in pizza? Now, Robin, you're a genius. Let's do that. Okay. That would be a not too sensitive topic to dig into. All right. If we could take on one side, so I want you to consider that polarities are things that are happening that feel like, so I wouldn't put pizza actually as a polarity. It's something that no matter what happens in your life, it feels like there's a pendulum swinging. So you could take work-life balance, right? So it always feels like something that there's a tension, that sometimes you're spending too much time at home. Sure, that never happens. Sometimes you're spending too much time at work, and there's this seesaw that's kind of at work. So when we talk about polarities, they are not opposites, but they're things that can be working complementary, that there's a tension with all the time. So the in-breath and the out-breath, day and night, those are polarities. Let's say you wanted to run a marathon and you wanted to build up your stamina. If you never rested, then there would be a consequence from never resting, right? Or not exercising enough and you're trying to run a marathon, right? So the idea of a polarity is there's these two tensions that go all the time. I'm sorry, Vanessa, asking in Italian. But so we can choose, what I might choose is like environment and economics, right? The sense of you can't have these two pieces, and people think that they're an or, nature and nurture, nature or nurture. It's actually an and, right? And a lot of these things that we think in opposition are actually ands. How do we have both of those pieces? And so I've worked with clients where they like really aggressively believe that you can't look after the environment and be and look after the financial piece. And how we work through that is by identifying first, what are the values that are underlying it? So I'm going to choose work-life balance because I feel like we can talk about that without getting super irate. What's a value that's underneath work? Why do you want to work? What do you value about working? And you can put it in the chat or you can yell it out. Losing my screen. Being satisfied, financial returns, learning and sharing knowledge, contribution, purpose. I enjoy it, satisfaction. Beautiful, all right? Then what is it that you value about being at home and spending time at home? Yep. So what do you enjoy, Kylie, about spending time with the family? Yeah, quiet. I imagine if you're working with primary school as well. Relaxation, rest. So good. Recharging your batteries, spending time in the garden. Very good. I'm going to share my screen, so it's probably easier to talk about these. Okay, I think I can do it. I think I can. I love my family. Yeah, very good. Do you feel like these two aspects are easy for you to balance? You feel like they're just just sits like that? Or at times you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm just working so hard. Or, oh my gosh, my kids are annoying. Or my husband's annoying, or wife, or whatever, when you spend too much time either way, right? Yeah, spending time on hobbies. So if we say, all right, we value that, yes, until reports are due. I imagine reports are due fairly often. But yeah, I think some of us have actually very masterful in balancing these two polarities. Yeah, that's right. So that would be Kylie thinking about that. We're going to go to the next piece, and it's actually talking about what happens if we are going too far in one direction. What's your early warning as such? Right. So if I share my screen, so you can see what's coming up. I can change that. Okay, so there's a value in seeing polarities, and what's interesting is once you start to see these, they start to show up everywhere. But the reason that we work in this space, I train in this space, but also we're using it when we're interacting with people, is it's a really great way we can start to address some of these big complex issues without being overwhelmed. When we are interested in change or transformation, and that might be, we're constantly dealing in change when you're working with young people, and constantly working with change as people are, learning and taking on new things at an academic level. We are seeing more and more polarizing issues. And what I think is key is that we have forgotten how to have conversations around polarized issues. And for me, part of this work came about, how do I make what I feel is inside of me and implicit explicit? How do I describe a process of being able to work with people that have very different views than I? So until pre-COVID, I was living permanently on the road. I had been for 5 years, and I was living in farmers and ranchers' houses, and those producers might have very different religious views than I. They might be different political views than me. They may have different views about the environment, and I could live with them. I can love working with these people, no matter what their viewpoint, how their viewpoints might differ. So what's important for me is that polarization is not about me making someone else believe, like take on my viewpoint. It's about finding this, where do we find balance? And also, where do we avoid the unintended consequences? And if we can train people today to be able to work through a world where we're not going to have these issues, and I could think about this with climate change, right? So seeing what is being put forth as solutions to climate change right now, like geoengineering. What could be a possible unintended consequence of geoengineering? Or even bioengineering. It's like, where's the thinking to really think beyond our horizon of learning of what could be a potential unintended consequence? So these polarity maps help us work through this, which I really love. And also, if we're in a vicious downward cycle, so working too hard, how do we switch that to what we call a more virtuous cycle? I also think that seeing the polarities increases our capacity to love, not only love ourselves, but also be able to love the people that we're working with, even if their viewpoints are different. And I have a really good example, but I'll leave it. All right, so this is a polarity map. And so what we did already, we started, is we actually put in, on this side, we put, I wonder if I can just draw. I've never done this. Oh, W for work. And I'm going to put home, H for home. Bear with me. Right. So what we did is we looked at the values piece. So if we think about what happens, why would you want to balance work and life? Tell me a little bit about that. Why would we want to balance work and life? What's the greater purpose from balancing that? What do you get?
Greater health.
Yeah, so we would have like just health. I wonder if I can do it. Oh, this one might work. Health. Okay. All your teachers are like, what the heck? Health. Oh no. That's meant to say health. Just bear with me. Terrible, terrible. All right. So let's just say health. So that health could, yeah, that could be inner, outer health, whatever. So we talked about value. If we were valuing, why is it that we wanted to value on this side of things? Let's see if I can just type it. It's going to be a lot less painful. We had satisfaction, purpose. What else did you have? Is it joy? What was in there? What'd you have? Throw it at me.
Yeah, enjoyment.
Enjoyment. Well, you guys had more on the benefit of staying home. Enjoyment, contribution, purpose. Oh, money. Right. Right. And then on this side, we had rest, relax, quiet. What else did you have?
Gardening,
Mm.
space to be myself and regroup sorts, hobbies.
Mm. Nice. Nice. So when I'm working with groups, let's say I'm working with, so I can be working with large scale conventional producers, right? That are beginning to think that maybe they're wanting to change some of their approaches. But if I come at it in terms of, you're wrong, there's a better way to do this, by the way, guilt, shame, fear, none of those are very successful models for creative thinking or of learning. And if people feel like their values are being challenged, what they do is they put their heels in, and that's not very effective when I'm wanting to work with groups. So what I do is actually ask people, what is it that you currently value and enjoy about this poll on the left? So what is it that you enjoy about, in this case, work or working with producers? It might be, what do you value about conventional agriculture? And they'll tell me things like, it's easy, it's simple, it's a 1, 2, 3 step, they don't have to think too much. And those are things that we're like, okay, how do we ensure that we can maintain those values and bring that into something new that we might be proposing, where I start to see resistance or whatever. So if we think about the fears, like the deeper fear, let's say that you didn't have a good work-life balance and your health is compromised. What's your deeper fear from that lack of balance? What's your deepest fear? What would be your worst case scenario? If you were overworking or spending too much time at home, what's that? What's that worst case scenario?
It's Ali. I think getting sick from being too stressed, like not having time, like getting ill, getting an illness that's brought on from stress.
Yes, getting sick or an early grave. Exactly. So you can see like not attending to this can lead to some pretty negative consequences. So what's an early warning? Your fear. So the fear would be what would be a negative result if we over-focused on work to the neglect of home? What's your fear if you just focus on work at the neglect of home? What's a fear?
Wide.
Family issues.
Family issues. So that could be like yep, excellent. Family issues. What else? Oh, yep, lose connection.
Just exhaustion.
Yeah. Yes, if you've just been working and not filling up your tank, not getting that rest and relaxation. Yeah, so the disharmony could be with others and the disharmony. So if you're disorganized, you mean like you're feeling like chaotic, disorganized? Would that be right, Robin?
Yeah, overwhelmed.
Ooh,
Just
yeah.
not able to cope with anything.
Yeah, right. Now let's do the same thing on the other side. So let's say, what's a fear? So a negative result if we overfocus just on home and neglect work. What's your fear? Yeah. If you have no money, what's the fear? What can't we do? Yeah. Which is ironic, isn't it? If we can't have holidays.
And you
But
can't
actually,
pursue your passions, can't pursue your hobbies, or sometimes.
yeah. You also appreciate being unprepared. So unprepared for anything that comes your way.
Often you
Yeah,
can't be creative either.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, frustration. Can't be creative. Nice. Really good. So if you think about the early warnings, so these are measurable things that you can actually count, that you can like measure, that will let you know that you've got too far in the downside of one pole. So let's say you've got down into the fears. So you're starting to notice some issues maybe with family. What would be some of those early warnings? What do you start to notice? It could be with the family or with yourself, that you've been focusing too much on work. What would be the early warning? Yeah, being short-tempered. Yeah, grumpy husband. Exhaustion. Brilliant. Right, so we have early warnings when we have been focusing on one pole more than the others. That say, what's the early warning? Things that we can start to feel, start to measure if we've been spending too much time at home. Oh, I love that. House gets messy. Can I add that? Yep. So there'd be poor performance at work. What are we thinking? You cheeky sod. Inbox is full. Oh, yeah. Workload piling up. And then how does that feel? Does anyone yell at you? Do you get people starting to growl you if you're spending too much time at home? It's stressful. Yeah.
Lack of motivation.
Yeah, so there's a lack of motivation is an early warning. So like sometimes I see that procrastination is actually an early sign. Like we think like procrastination can be an early sign of like we've just got too much going on. We're actually overwhelmed. Yeah, like you're at the bottom of a mountain. Totally, Jeff. All right. So then we go to, well, how do we start to take action or gain momentum on with the positive side? So there's things that we can start to do. So if you think about the left-hand side, these values, what are some of the things we can gain or maintain to keep that positive result? So if we're just focusing on the work side, and we actually use this as like quite prescriptive in terms of what are you doing, who's doing it, by when, to make sure that we're maintaining these values or addressing these early warnings. So what might be an action that you are avoiding the cost of what's going to happen on, like, so think of an action that you're going to gain to get the positive results. What kind of actions do you take to ensure that you've got satisfaction, purpose, and finances? What kind of things are actions that you can do? Oh yeah, say no. Very good. Something that we all need to do. Big boy, big girl pants. What are action steps to ensure that we're keeping satisfaction and purpose and enjoyment in your job? Beautiful. Prioritizing.
Yeah. I think one of my coaches said, just have 3 things on a list, no more. And either attend to them or cross them off.
Exactly. Beautiful. And I think leaving this job, that's a Tara, that changed jobs is when is listening to those early warnings and going, actually at this point that was going to be the best thing for you to do, right? So accepting help, so delegating perhaps to ensure that you're keeping that enjoyment, that work stays at work. Oh, that's really, really awesome, guys. All right. So thinking of action steps on the other side, right? How do we ensure that we keep those positive outcomes on by focusing on that time at home? What are some of the things that you could do? Actionable, measurable. I'm going to say put my phone down. Just for me. Sleep. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that piece is probably one of the most underrated aspects for well-being, to ensure you're getting that rest, relaxation, presence. Very nice. So actually being in that moment, not thinking about other things that you need to be doing, just being present. And it's so much easier said than done, right? But just coming into that. Yeah, so Kylie, you can't stop thoughts racing around in your mind. So finding like a wind down practice, something that you could use. I use those blue blocking glasses, so your melatonin starts getting produced, but just finding ways to stop those racing thoughts or slow them down. Sleep. You heard wind down. No wine. So wine is a sedative. It actually works the opposite. We get less good sleep with a wind down. Yeah. So I think planning and problem solving, Kylie, if you could actually approach your wind down program on that side, that would be kind of cool. So the purpose of, I mean, this is quite a complex exercise, but I will do this through working with people in terms of identifying these values and actually going, well, what's the cost? What is the cost if we were just to focus on one polarity at the cost at the expense of this other side of things, and really getting people present to there are these costs when we just focus on one aspect over the other, but there's also a benefit, right? So there's a benefit I have a benefit from focusing more on work than home, in terms of then I don't have to tidy the house. Just saying, right? So there's things that I can do. So it's not always negative or positive, but what I found is if you start to see where polarities are at work, we can actually start to stop the swing, so that instead of these extreme swings, how can I have it so that virtuous cycle becomes tighter and tighter? So instead of this big swinging, that we just have this undulation from, oh, okay, I've started to notice that I feel like I can't be creative, or I'm starting to feel disorganized, or my husband is grumpy. That where am I starting to swing, and then what are some of the action steps that I can take? So those action steps at the top right are really what I can do to address the early warnings on the bottom left. Does that make sense? So by sharing the load, winding down, getting sleep, that perhaps this can help with this your own short-temperedness. Like one of my early warnings is irritability, and just really noticing where am I need to pay attention. Like irritability is asking me to pay attention to where am I not in balance in some aspect in my life. So we did this as an exercise we've done this with very large groups, like 160 people, and we've also done it one-on-one when I'm working with clients. But I might be doing this as well around a behavioral strategy that maybe we're trying to look at, working with a child maybe that only wants to do one aspect, but there's a cost, right? There's one side of the pendulum that they only want to do, like I don't know, I only want to yell and scream and pull my sister's hair or something. And it's like, okay, well, what's the other side of this pendulum? Is there some piece like of rest, of quiet, of inner reflection that child might be struggling with? And I say that without any experience of having ever rolled this out with children. But for me, this is something I can bring to some of these big topics, like burning coal, or going to solar power, is we can actually work through this exercise with these kind of bigger topics. Healthcare, social type aspects. So super fun. You went 4 days a week 4 years ago. Best thing you've done. Martin, you're an inspiration. I need to talk to more people like you. Anyway, was there anything that you saw out of that you're like, oh, I can see where a polarity might be showing up in your own life? I know Zoom's not the best place to have these conversations, but it does seem like we have to have these conversations on Zoom more and more.
Nicole, can you talk about the different beliefs that come from these polar views?
Like a different belief system that might be running underneath?
Yeah, so there might be something like a value of everybody wants the best thing for their health, but the belief of what health means might be the polarity.
Yes. Yeah. And I think if we could use immunization or not immunization, it was so interesting when you ask people what the values were, it's actually health. It's the same thing, but then when you drill down on it, one seemed to be more the health of the individual and one seemed to be more health of community. So it's how do we have both? How do we have both? And asking those questions, because actually deep down what unites everybody on either sides of that argument is the same belief, which is health and care. Okay, so actually this is what we have in common. How is it we could have both? How could we have health of an individual and health of a community, and have a conversation from that perspective, as opposed to making it your particular position is threatening the community, or your particular position threatens the individual? Is asking the question, and how can we have both? And something new might emerge in a conversation. You need to acknowledge that the values piece first. So actually acknowledge what people care about. What is it that you really care about? Well, do actually really care about people. And that's what I found was a thread that was winding through all of this. And so I can, doing these exercises, I can actually put my own belief system to the side and get curious. So I want to get curious about that other person's viewpoint and not have it mean that what they're saying is that I'm wrong. So an example of it, and I mention it a lot because it was so impactful at the time, was I was moving cows. I had a 3-day cattle drive, and the very first night of that cattle drive, so it's a big muster, you know, we're moving cattle about 45 kilometers over a couple of days, is that ranchers started talking about wolves. And I don't have a particularly strong viewpoint about wolves. I mean, I do have a belief that I'd like to see wolves here, but all I said was that, isn't it interesting what the range riders are doing with the wolf? That's all I said. And then the following morning, I get up and I can see there's a couple of ranchers starting to move cattle down below where we were camped. So I got on horseback and went down to help. And I got cornered by this rancher who proceeded to yell at me for 40 minutes. He yelled at me about how the wolf was the apocalypse in America, that a wolf was like someone coming into your house and breaking all the paintings, all your family photographs, destroying everything in your house. That was what the wolf was. 40 minutes, this guy yelled and ranted. And I just said, well, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. Why is it important for you? I just got really curious. And I think I had my horse, so that kind of gave me a bit of a physical barrier. I think if I hadn't been on horseback, it might have been a little different. And then another 4 ranchers came over and joined in. And it was intense. And I must say later on, I did have a little cry. But after he ran out of things to say, like I gave him all the space to say everything that you need to say. And then we went and started moving cattle. An hour later, like he rode off and he came back and he said, I like birds. I was like, oh, okay, good for you. And then he rode off. And then probably another hour and a half later, he came back and he said, my wife says I don't like change. I was like, I can see that. And he rode off and then he came back. And by the end of the day, he was like my best friend. And what had happened was that I never disputed his values. I never disputed his belief. I just allowed him to talk. Was it uncomfortable? Yes. But I was never like a boundary or a barrier for him to be able to say what he needed to say. And in that space, what it enabled him to do was reflect on his own belief systems and how he doesn't like change. And actually, he does like the environment and he likes birds and he likes all this sort of stuff, that he got to see himself. And I think, and whatever he wants to do with that, that's fine. But for me, it was just this moment of, if I can allow someone to share their views, and I know it's not about me personally, what conversations become possible and what can somebody see? So it was a really cool moment, and it wasn't very comfortable. But how do we train our students in being able to have these rough conversations without physical violence, without polarity, without hatred of, different cultures and different beliefs? Like, can you be present to someone talking about their views about Buddha or God or cultural beliefs? Like, what does it look like to create a world where we can start to have conversations? Yeah. Yes, we train the adults. We do indeed. We do indeed. But I often find how interesting it is how children can plant a seed in their parents. I work with Apricot Lane Farms. I don't know if you guys have seen The Biggest Little Farm. And if you talk to John about that movie, he said, I wrote that for an 8-year-old. I wrote that movie for an 8-year-old to be inspired to influence his parents or their parents. And that's actually what they find, is they get thousands and thousands of visitors every year because the children have dragged their parents along to go and have a look at this Biggest Little Farm and have a conversation about food quality. And I don't know if you guys have examples of seeing where your children have actually trained the adults. I'd love to hear. Does it not happen? Yeah, to appreciate an art form like dance. We actually had a workshop in Australia in April. We had 140 farmers. And seeing them play, we had quite a lot of young people. Yeah, training them to listen to modern music. But we had quite a lot of young people that we actually trained them to facilitate, so that you had people in their late teens and 20s that actually facilitated adults in the field. And what it did is it gave those adults permission to play in a way that I have not witnessed before and I haven't seen since. But yeah. Well, see, that's the thing with secondary education, is suddenly we take ourselves very seriously and we get very significant and we get very concerned about what we look like and getting it right and wrong. And this is the piece, I think, of how do we expand that learning piece to realize that there's actually very little in the world that is truly right and truly wrong. Right? There's so much gray. And I think even just a system that teaches us like 1 + 1 is 2 is like, okay, maybe, but is that true when you go outside? So if you have one cloud and you put them together, what do you get? How many clouds? Fingers. Show me your fingers. Right? What if you have a billy goat and a nanny goat and you put them outside together for a little while? What do you get? Or you could get one if you got a very aggressive one. You could have 4, 5. Is, you know, and you get 2 drops of water, they become 1. Is there so many examples of where 1 + 1 is not 2? And I think the power of spending time with children and adults to start to go, is it always that black and white? Is it really this one answer? And yes, we do have facts that, you know, in this year, this thing happened. But how do we engender children that are starting to question creatively and begin to find and have something emergent become possible? Yes, emergence. That's right, Jeff. Look at that. I don't know if you've seen there's a documentary called The Greatest Mysteries, The Greatest Unknown. And it's a documentary where they take a scientist to go and visit another scientist. So they take the best scientist in their field to go and visit another scientist. It's on Netflix. If anyone knows the name of it, I think it's The Greatest Unknown. And so they take a microbiologist to go and talk to a brain specialist. They take a brain doctor to go and visit an astrophysicist. They take people that work in the bottom of the deepest oceans, the furthest stars. And the take home was that all of these scientists are saying we know possibly 0.1% of what we think we know. There's more that we don't know than what we do know. And when we're educating people in a system that says this is the answer, where do we undermine creativity? Where do we undermine the fact that actually as a human race, we still really don't know? And what we need is people that are able to think creatively, to think adaptively, to think outside the box, because the issues that are facing this generation are not simple yes, no answers. And that's part of the joy of coaching, I think, is that I don't have the answer, right? I don't know. But someone I'm working with could come up with something that's just incredibly just original. I hadn't thought about that. And then what becomes possible when we look at this situation in this way. Sorry, that's a really bad example. So, Donna, you're saying, yes, I read our problem is what we know and not what we don't. Yeah. Tell me more about that, Donna. What do you mean?
That just, yeah, exactly what you're talking about. Our preconceived learnings or ideas gets in the way of us cracking open that mind to something new. I'm really interested in that at the moment. Why is 1 + 1 2? And I think that's the struggle I have with education, in secondary school in particular, because I think in primary school, and it's a system, you know, the poor teachers are bound by this, but in primary school you have the time to explore, but then in secondary we've got to get on with it and get that mark at the end of the year. But that and through our farming, that's what we're finding too, is it's the preconceived ideas. And I've just had this theory that, is it, say you have a grandparent that's been running a farm or a father and son, and there's the father won't see the son's point of view, but will possibly entertain the grandson, because they don't, maybe it's that one generation of skipping, that you don't have this immediate responsibility to that next generation, but you skip one, and it almost brings that freedom of, why, granddad? And I'm just, I think there's certainly the younger generation can get away with more curiosity than the teenagers, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think there's multiple, I believe there's multiple reasons for that. I also think, for me, the only piece I can be really powerful in is, who am I being when I'm with different people? Who am I being when I'm with children, apart from terrified? No, who am I being in terms of, do I bring curiosity? Do I bring wonder? Or am I bringing wrong and right? Do I bring a space that's safe for someone to explore an idea? Or do I have a preconceived assumption in my mind about how something will go? Because the more that I can hold a space for people to learn, for creativity to arise, then that's the key. And that's the only piece I can be accountable for, right? Is that it doesn't matter if that is a 5-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 55-year-old. Where can we just have a conversation where people feel like they can be their authentic selves? And that, for me, is the joy of coaching, is I walk onto a property or I'm working with somebody and I'm just asking a lot of questions. Like, I bring that wonderment that I had when I was 3, when you just ask why, and there's just this open ball of like curiosity. And what I noticed, and I did this with my son, is he had really, it's sat out in my memory, because we were driving through this valley with these trees, and there was all this mist coming off the trees, all this transpiration, you know, this mist was moving down the valley, and it was beautiful. And my son asked me what it was. And I was already with, well, it's an inversion layer with cold and warm air, and there's moisture coming off the, you know, the trees are transpiring. And he was 4, I think. And I stopped myself and I said to him, well, I wonder, what do you think it is? And he said, dragon smoke. And I was like, oh, dude, that's so much better than the dumb answer I had. You know, like, I've got all the answers. But actually, by allowing him to say dragon smoke, it opened something up for me. Like, it just got me to stop about being a know-it-all, and having some technical answer, when maybe my role is just to be there for him to be in wonderment and explore something I've forgotten how to do. I've forgotten. Yeah. I've forgotten the dragons. Yeah, no, Simone, that study, the creative genius study, NASA has it. So NASA was looking at, where did that creative genius come from in young people? Yeah. And they also looked at autism as a creative
absolutely
genius. Yes. And so, and I get the challenge that we are in, because we're in these academic systems that do require the route learning and the dates of Columbus or whatever, and all that stuff that I've so forgotten. 1066, there was some battle in England. I'm like, you know, I can remember it at the time, it doesn't relate to my life today. Is how do we find these places that do relate to people's real lives, that do bring that autonomy, that mastery, that beauty that you guys are bringing through these sounds like these food systems, is how do we make this relatable to someone's life, but how do we really create creative geniuses?
Mm.
And it's a lot of pressure, right? Did you want to say something, Donna?
No.
So have you guys got any questions for me? I've just kind of yacked away at you. Have you ever had a young person just startle you with something that they've come up with? You're like, it's genius.
I'll jump in if no one else does. I've always got a few brewing here, Nicole, so
Yes.
I'll give people some space to think about it too. So you work a lot with adults now.
Mm-hmm.
If you could kind of go back and, what's one thing do you think that we really need to encourage our children to be learning, or our young people to be learning, that is going to prepare them for what you're seeing with adults? And I take that into consideration of our different contexts, or in different countries, etc. But I know you get a kind of overall sense of that.
I think the comfort in uncertainty, because we live in an uncertain world and nature is uncertain, and yet so much of what we do in this modern society is try and control uncertainty. And actually, the more that we try and control uncertainty, the more unintended consequences. And you could think of so many examples that falls under. But actually, if we become adaptive and flexible in our ability to deal with uncertainty, then I think we address a lot of the fear that people are feeling right now. Because fear, there's a couple of things that happen when we're in a fear state. One, it shuts down there's studies that show when you're in a fear state, your ability to cognitively process goes down by about 80%, and your IQ goes down by 10 points. I believe it's 10. Is that if we're operating in fear, also the blood travels 5 miles less through your body. If you can imagine, 5 miles less, your body, the blood flow is constricted, so it concentrates in those big muscles for you to run, and it comes away from the brain. So in that fear state, we're not thinking. And how many initiatives we have for, let's say, climate change, it's all about fear. There's so much fear behind it. Or COVID, wanting people to change behaviors around that. It was all fear-based. And if we've got people that can actually go, oh, that's really interesting, and I'm not going to approach that in fear, then they're able to think. And I think, what does it look like to have people that can think even when they're in these hypervigilant, fearful states? And that's something I'm very passionate about. Oh, Jeff asks, have you ever walked into a room and the body language is, I just don't want to be here? Totally. I think your answer during proposition, Jeff. I do think curiosity is the way that we do that. We talking about it yesterday. We've got so many videos of workshops, of examples of, and I have to do this to show you, where you get these guys with their arms folded at the front of the room and these kind of scowls on their faces, and then to watch them start to relax that body language to the point that they're leaning forward. We're going to have to do a collage of it, because it happens. And I think it's because I'm not telling people they're wrong, and I'm not using fear as a tactic. We all know that things are not working well, okay, if that's about climate or human health. Like, I don't focus on the fear, because I know it's not a good teaching tool, and instead look at values. What do we care about? What makes you feel nostalgic? What do you love? What's your favorite place in the world? Like, that's where I teach from, is I teach from that space of, and if it's with conventional farmers, I might not say the L word, love. And again, I might, right? But what do you love? What do you care about? Why are you farming? That's a question I'll throw to people. What got you into farming? And they get them back into that love groove. And then that helps to address some of that body language. It's very rarely, Jeff, and there are a couple of, I have had some encounters and I'm like, just why are you here? You're obviously not interested. And actually in Australia, I asked someone to leave. Well, I didn't ask him to leave. I made it clear that he wasn't having a good time. So why, yeah, I think he was just maybe being told by his boss to be there and he was just disruptive. But I didn't tell him to leave. I let him see that he didn't want to be there. But yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. No. But yeah, Simone, I think, what do you love about coming to school? Would you ask that from about 2 children? What do you love? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you, and I think sometimes it takes that moment to sit and reflect and go, oh, I don't hate school. I don't hate all of school. There's some parts maybe that they don't enjoy as much, but like even as adults, when you reflect back on your own early school years, I bet there's lots of things you remember that were enjoyable, right? Running around with your friends, maybe a topic. I used
Yeah,
to
and
really like creating.
I think it can be easy for kids to fall into a bit of a slipstream of not appreciating school enough and all the opportunities they're given. Yeah, I just wonder, thinking back, I don't think I gave my students, yeah, I haven't been in high schools for probably about 10 years, but yeah, I don't know if I gave my students enough opportunity to just really appreciate what they had and, you know, what would happen if you weren't here? You know, what would you prefer to be doing? And would you really be wanting to do that? And how long would you like to be doing that for? And
Yeah.
there was a senior teacher at my school, and there was one kid in my class who just kept mucking around and he just wouldn't pull up. So one day the senior teacher came into my room and just called him out, and he walked him over to his locker and said, sorry, mate, you're just going to have to go. We can't have you here. Like, you're not, you know. And it was really interesting. This teenage boy started crying, you know, all tough all the time, always mucking up. And the minute that head teacher said very seriously, obviously a very good actor, and put on his best, you know, best performance and said, you know, you can't be here like this, totally changed when he realized that it wasn't just something that would be given, you know, it was, you know, it was a privilege to be able to go to school and to be at this school with his friends. It was just a local you know, public school, but yeah, it really changed something for that student, and he changed completely in my class. And
Yeah.
you know, I just wonder how often students actually take the time to really appreciate their teachers, you know, the fact that they get an education. You know, it's I don't know, an interesting kind of thing, I guess. You're talking in the context of farming, but yeah.
Well, I wonder
think
too
it's
on
really important.
Oh, sorry, go.
Sorry, I was going to say it's really good when you get to know the students and ask them which teachers they like and what it is that they like about them. I think there's always insight to be had from that, and I think also there's this expectation that teachers are the bearer of all knowledge, and I think when teachers can accept in themselves that the children are there to teach us just as much as we are there to teach them. In fact, more often than not, I learn more from the children than I do from my colleagues. But it means that you've got to adopt a certain way of being with them. And that means you've got to drop the authority. So in some ways, you can have a mutual respect between you, but when they don't feel fearful of your authority, then they will they will show you themselves. They will show you the learning and the insights. Like if you understand sometimes what a child needs to muster to bring to the school every day, to arrive and to show up, they have got so much more knowledge than we have, because for many of them, they're bearing a lot more than we can even fathom, and yet they continue to show up in ways that we don't. So you always just listen and ask the right questions, and they will forever teach us, always, every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that takes a certain courage on your behalf. I mean, you're allowing yourself to be vulnerable. You are being engaged with your students, and you're bringing that empathy. And I think sometimes it's so easy for us to lose sight of those things when we've got boxes to tick and we're tired and we're in environments that, can be really, really stressful. Is how do we check back in on that, or remind ourselves to bring empathy, that piece of like not knowing what a child is dealing with when they're at home. I mean, that's huge. They bring all of that into a classroom.
And they manage that in ways that a lot of adults can't. They regulate themselves in ways that teachers can't. That's why teachers lose it at kids. They're amazing. They really are. And they carry knowledge that I'm in awe of.
Mm. Oh, that's so beautiful. I wish you were my teacher. But yes, I think, we started just thinking about the polarity of home and life, and how we can't make some of this available to our students if we're not making it available to ourselves, if we're not self-caring, if we're not sleeping, if we're not bringing empathy to our own selves. And that's where I find I'm less effective when I'm working with people, and I can be working with really large farming or ranching operations that might have, like, I've been in the room before and I've had 30 men that all work on the same operation, no women, and checking in with somebody before I even get myself into that room. Like, I have my own coaches that'll actually call and say, look, I'm feeling intimidated. I'm feeling like I'm not good enough. I feel like I don't have any energy for this. And I will check. I have my buddies that I'll check in with if I am struggling. And I'll also check out, like, if I'm in the middle of a situation and I feel like I've had a couple, and they weren't clients, but like the son of a client and the husband of a client, like yelling at me and just being really nasty, is I'll actually remove myself from that situation, go and talk to one of my buddies on the phone to get myself kind of centered and grounded so I can be in the space again with them, or not. Setting boundaries, I think, with some of those farmers has been really important. But I think the self-care piece is I don't know, do they teach that at teachers' school? Do you learn self-care? Yeah, good. We need to go to Jane's one. I did a certificate in adult teaching with Penny Brownlee in New Zealand, and she was phenomenal. And it was a 10-week course, and the very first day, the whole day was just about love. And she was like, if you don't love yourself, then how would you love a student? How would your students know if you don't love yourself? And then they don't regard your view, what you have to speak or anything that you're saying, it's inauthentic because you don't have self-love. And that program, everybody changed, like every student either changed their jobs, left their relationships, moved house, like it was one of those programs where you totally just flipped everything on its head. And it started with, are we grounding ourselves in love and taking care of ourselves? Otherwise we're, we get stuck on other people. I know it's such an esoteric concept. And there's such incredible research coming out. So if you're interested in some of the neuroscience of change and the neuroscience of teaching, I really recommend Coaches Rising. I do their online schools. And it's very science-based in terms of what love does in the body, the hormones, how that relates to learning, how that relates to hormones in our whole functional system in the body when we're coming either from love versus fear. And so what's interesting to me is things that I used to kind of consider woo-woo and I was careful about when I'm working with, big operations, is that I can now introduce some of these concepts because there's research behind it. Which And it's like, why do I have to have research behind this stuff when I know intuitively that that love is important, and having empathy and being someone that I don't have barriers to what they have to say. I'm not going to judge them. I do judge them, but it happens very quickly, and I catch it and I put it to the side, and I'm not bringing assumptions when I'm working with someone. Like, all of that makes me so much more effective as a coach or as a teacher than if I wasn't responsible for those pieces. So it's for me, it's an invitation, is how do we keep working on ourselves to make ourselves more effective with the people around us.
Beautifully said, Nicole. And I think that probably is a really nice close to our meeting too, and a really lovely note to end on. And I agree, I think it's something that we can definitely introduce more into our teacher training. I'll take that cue and definitely be taking that back into my workplace, because that's what I'm involved in, is teacher training. And yeah, and I know the whole concept of self-love is kind of getting, and self-care is getting more commonplace now and more talked about. And there's lots of different practices and means different things to different people, but I think it's just such a important place to start. So yeah, thank you. Huge round of applause from the crowd. All our Zoom claps.
Well, thank you for spending your breakfast with me. I really appreciate you waking up early and making this work. I think we thought there's only like one or two of you would turn up, so yay. It's so great to recognize some of the names. Yeah, Kylie, I think Simone did record this, so this will be available.
Yeah, I'll put it up on our website coming soon, and it will actually probably in the next couple of weeks. Really, this time I've been saying it for a little while, so but yeah, we've got everything has happened. So yes, it's very exciting that it will come soon. So I'll definitely put it up in there. It's a little members area, part of our website, Nicole, that we've just created for all our teachers. So yeah, which is really exciting.
All right. Well, I feel very honored that you've invited me. It's such a cool conversation. So thanks for being open to this conversation. Really enjoyed meeting you all, and yeah, all the best on the other side of the world, and go All Blacks. Thanks, Martin.
See you all. Bye.
Guys, bye.
Thanks again, Nicole.